So here we are in Mark chapter 5. This is week 16, by the way, if you've been counting, of our Gospel of Mark series, where we've been getting to know Jesus again, getting to know Jesus in his own habitat, observing what Jesus is up to, responding to the ways that Jesus is inviting us into his kind of life. Last week, it got a little tense with the storm on the sea. And today, the tension continues. And we're going to jump right in to chapter 5 and verse 1. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one can bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. So by no means is this a fun introduction. It's not really a fun thing to talk about at all. Early on in the book of Mark, we've seen that Jesus deals with this spiritual realm. And we've talked about a few weeks ago how to make that a normal conversation in our Christian lives. We've learned to normalize a lot of hard things and a lot of awkward things and a lot of painful things in our world. Our church especially has done a great job at normalizing hard things in life, not reacting to people who've walked through difficult situations and scenarios. We've learned how to normalize things like mental health conversation. We've learned to normalize things like addiction recovery. We've learned to normalize things like chronic pain and disease. We've learned how to engage people who are suffering in any number of ways. But this specific one, because it has this nature of being sort of out there, this idea that there's a spiritual world and not every part of the spiritual world is a good thing or a healthy thing to interact with, that there's actually there's actually danger in the spiritual world. That's not a conversation that has really been normalized in the church all that well. Or if it is normalized, it's sort of taken to this extreme thing where that's the only thing that ever gets talked about. So we're sort of seeking to normalize Jesus' interaction with the spiritual world and what part we might play in that as well. This text simply describes this man as a man with an impure spirit. Other texts that talk about this kind of stuff, they use a common word that's often translated as demon-possessed. You read your New Testament or you read commentaries, and you'll see this word possessed come up fairly often. The Greek word that gets translated into possessed is daimonizomai. Daimonizomai. And a better translation is demonized, not possessed. Possessed is sort of like the popular Hollywood spin on this subject. Possessed is like you are utterly out of control of your own behaviors, of your own feelings, of your own choices. And one big aspect of normalizing hard things is to fully affirm that you are going through a real thing and a hard thing, and it afflicts you. Whether that's mental health issues, whether that's addiction issues, but we never say to a person who's suffering, you have no agency. You are completely out of control. You are unable to make your own healthy choices and take next steps to be able to get free of this thing. We don't use that language, so we shouldn't use that language when it comes to spiritual realities either. So let's not use the language of possession, like a person has no agency or control over their choices. Let's use the New Testament healthy word of demonized, which we can think of as afflicted by a spirit. Afflicted, tormented, bothered, harassed, influenced by, but not possessed. That's a little side note. If you're having trouble connecting with that language, good. That's okay. It's a conversation that we're sort of just beginning to have. But if you're having trouble connecting with that kind of reality, let's take a step back and let's consider this man that Jesus is interacting with. This is a man that is described just by the first 5 verses like this. Somebody who is isolated. This is somebody who is feared. Like people don't like to be around him because he's scary and erratic and maybe acts out dangerously. This is a person who practices self-harm. He cuts himself with stones. This is a person who seems like everyone has given up on. So if we're not quite able to understand the terms of the spirit stuff, we can certainly understand the real world human side of this. We've all experienced someone very likely who has felt this way. We may be someone who has felt this way often. There's a whole lot of people out there who've been given up on. And sometimes we don't know how to respond to that, what to do, how to enter in, how we can help, what the boundaries are. And it's difficult, but you just sort of start. Like life happens, you grow up, you mature, you encounter people, you start, you make mistakes, you learn from your mistakes, you do better the next time you have an opportunity. My first introduction was when I was in college. I went to the University of Connecticut, upstate Connecticut, and for some reason I found myself in East Hartford on a Sunday afternoon. There's no reason ever to be in East Hartford. Hartford or West Hartford, yeah, East Hartford, no. I was running out of gas. So I went to the gas station in East Hartford, and I was very quickly approached by a young guy, just a couple years older than me, that was sitting on the curb outside of the gas station. And I immediately went into fight or flight, and I didn't know what to do, but he just started talking at me. He had long curly hair, kind of a scraggly looking gentleman, had a backpack that was just like burgeoning with papers, with like papers and notebooks. And he just started talking to me and asking me questions about myself and my story. So I was like, hey, I'm a student, I'm an English major. He was like, oh, I was an English major. Okay, all right. Okay, we have something in common. I don't know how that bodes for my future, but there is a place that we can relate. And then he opened up his backpack and he started showing me poetry and short stories. And he let me into the creative side of his life. And we were having this like connection, and it was like going well. I didn't know where it was going, but it was like there was some mutuality happening. And then he's like, I want to show you this story. So he opens to a specific page in his notebook, and he's like, this is what's really going on in the world right now. This is what I'm really afraid of. And that story was about the nanobots. The nanobots that are implanted in all of our technology, and you have to unplug your toaster when you get home, or else the nanobots are going to come out and they're going to get you. And I said, okay, now this is sort of beyond what I'm able to relate to or or help. And it got hard. It got hard from there. It got hard from there. And then he eventually he said, "Hey, can I get a ride down the street?" I was like, "Okay." So I gave him a ride. I was a little nervous, but I gave him a ride. Then the most interesting thing happened when he got out of the car. We learned each other's names. He opened the door and he used these specific words. "Sean, thank you for listening to my testimony." Testimony. That's like my people's word. Testimony. Well, what's a testimony but a report of your life and your experiences? "Sean, thank you for listening to my story and my life and my experiences." As out there as they were, it came down to thank you for listening. So no matter kind of where we are on this perspective of like what the spiritual worldview is and what spiritual realities are like and how do we interact with like the dark forces, no matter where a person is, it's really, really fair to start with listening, especially for people who feel given up on. So Jesus is going to have this encounter with this man. Verse 6, he runs up on Jesus. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. And Jesus had no choice but to listen because now he's going to shout. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High?" Jesus hadn't identified himself at this point. So this is some supernatural information that this person has because of his afflicted condition. Not all supernatural information is appropriate. One of the boundaries we learn in the Christian worldview. Just because it's supernatural and it seems powerful and like it comes from somewhere, it doesn't mean it's good. He shouted at the top of his voice, "Jesus, Son of the Most High God, in God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. Notice there's a shift from singular to plural and legion and many. So there's an influx of evil spirits interacting with Jesus. This is what can fall under the category that people have used, a power encounter. This is a combative experience. This is good versus evil. This is movie, Hollywood quality stuff. That's why people can get so caught up in it. But notice how Jesus interacts. Good versus evil, power encounter. First, some observations about the spirits. The spirits are immediately on the defensive, and they make the first move towards Jesus. There's a really healthy principle in there, maybe a healthy boundary for some of us to hear. If we encounter someone that we sort of discern has something more going on than meets the eye, not really an okay thing to say, "Hey, I think you have demons." It's interesting that whenever Jesus had this sort of encounter, they always approached him. It's almost like Jesus' ministry of deliverance from spirits was a responsive ministry, not a proactive ministry, but a responsive ministry. And Jesus always did respond, but he didn't go out of his way looking for it, just an observation. And then the spirits use a very proper title, Jesus, Son of the Most High God. There was this idea, sort of in ancient days, but it's also carried over, that if you use the exact name of an enemy, especially in sort of the spiritual realm, you would have dominance over it. That's why whenever you were in trouble as a kid, you were called by your first and middle name. So, Sean Patrick, get over here, establishing dominance. But if you knew the full name, the hidden name, the secret name, that gave you a one-up. That could have been why this spirit is trying to do it like that. And then a spirit, aside from Jesus, invokes God's name. In God's name, don't torture me. Appealing to Yahweh, the one good and true God, the Father of Jesus, part of the Trinity. In God's name. Evil spirits can be very religious. Evil spirits are very manipulative. Scripture talks about Satan himself coming into form as an angel of what? Light. Religious, manipulative, using good-sounding spiritual Christian terminology. We need to discern that stuff. So those are some observations. You have the evil spirits, but you also have the man. So what is Jesus going to do here? The spirits are on the defensive. They're scared. They know that this person, Jesus, has more authority than they do. They're begging for their life. So verse 11. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus. Like they knew they were beat, they were whining, they were just trying to hold on because they knew they were defeated. They begged Jesus, send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them. Jesus, strangely, gave them permission. And the impure spirits, plural, came out of the man and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Wild story. We've done a little bit to maybe put ourselves in the shoes of this man who was suffering. Now maybe put yourself into the shoes of a pig farmer. And this guy shows up. And this guy interacts with this guy who's been in trouble for a long time, and something happens, and now your pigs run off a cliff and you're out of a job. Thanks, Jesus. What's going on? Let's dig into this a little bit. Right up front, I want to say this. Jesus sending the demons into the pigs has an urgently practical and a deeply symbolic meaning. So let's start with the urgently practical. Evil spirits are evil. Demons are evil. They're bad. They're wrong. They want to destroy God's creation. They're sort of single-minded. They just want to interrupt God's redemptive work in the world and destroy God's creation. And the pinnacle of God's creation is us. It's you and I. It's those who were made in God's image. We are image bearers. That's what we human beings are by definition. We are God's image bearers. So if you're trying to destroy God's good work in the world, you don't like God, you don't like the image of God, you're going to go after people. And you're going to seek to destroy, to steal, to kill, to lie, to interrupt, to confuse, to manipulate. That's what you're going to do. So, in wanting to destroy creation, the demons ask, hey, if we can't do it to this guy, Jesus, let us fulfill what we want to do at least. Send us into the pigs. We're destroyers. We got to destroy something. So if you're not going to let us destroy this guy, at least send us into these pigs and let us do what we do. And strangely, Jesus allows them to destroy. Now, why would he do that? Why not just send them into the abyss, into the pit, into a place where they can never bother anyone ever again? Let's talk about that. We're in ancient Israel. We're in the Middle East. We're among Jewish people, Israelite people. What kind of animals did Israelites not eat? What kind of animals would it be considered unclean to interact with if you were a God-fearing Israelite person? Pigs. Pigs were a Gentile introduction to society. Gentile simply meaning non-Jewish. At this point in history, Israel-Palestine was occupied by Rome. Caesar, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. There was a Caesar, and the Roman government set up kind of these areas, and they put in a hierarchy, and they would have soldiers stand on guard, and then people would come in, and merchants would come in. All those soldiers and all those leaders and all of that Roman hierarchy, they had to be fed. So pig farmers showed up, and they made some money selling bacon to the Roman soldiers and other Gentile type of people. It's a beautiful place to live. There were immigrants that weren't Jewish. So you have on the scene an unclean food group to the native people. So here's kind of what else is going on. These pigs can sort of represent Roman occupation. These pigs can represent Caesar and his imposition onto God's people. And remember the sea from last week. Jesus calming the storm. Remember what the sea represented. Forces of chaos, danger. The Israelites, not being a seafaring people, they would kind of fish and then come back. They didn't like to hang out on the ocean. The sea sort of represented cosmic, scary stuff. Sea monsters. Leviathan. Kind of these ancient principles of there's more going on under there than we really want to mess with. That's for those people. We sort of stay in our lane over here. So when Jesus wants to make a point, yeah, I need this guy to get free. The evil spirits aren't taking him down. But I also need to make a point to everybody watching. There's a spiritual reality, but there's also a social and political reality that Caesar and the people carrying out Caesar's will, don't have dominion in God's land. Jesus shows up and says, I have dominion in my Father's kingdom. So when there's an imposition and occupation from enemy forces, what does Jesus do to that? How does Jesus handle that? Into the sea you go. How one commenter I read put it. Into the sea you go. Your political powers, you wanting to control the people here, you infringing on land that isn't yours and you're trying to take by force, into the sea of chaos you go. So Jesus sending the pigs into the sea is putting a political stake in the ground. This is God's kingdom. And God's kingdom supersedes the Roman Empire all day, every day. Jesus, only Jesus, can set a person free from the worst of suffering and at the same time display that he is God and the king is not, the Caesar is not, the president is not. The only thing I could think of to compare this to, the only contemporary parallel I could imagine happening is if this episode happened today among us kind of people. Jesus set someone free from some oppressive spirits, and they said, Jesus, where do I go? Well, most of us are Gentile, bacon-enjoying kinds of people, so the pigs kind of don't have that kind of influence over us. You can go into the bumper stickers. You can go into the flags. You can go into people's yard signs of their preferred political candidate. And you could go there and they all set on fire. Preferred political candidate. You make that your own. Any lingering sense of identity that people want to hold on to and identifying with something other than God's kingdom, Jesus lights it on fire and sends it into the sea. Who else but Jesus can pull that off? Well, now there's a response. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town, in the countryside. Sorry, guys, you're not getting some bacon cheeseburgers anytime soon. And the people went out to see what happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Imagine the word goes out. The pigs are gone. Some maniac drove them into the ocean. That was the news. That's what got everyone's attention. That's what got everyone to come out of their house. That's what they wanted to see. They wanted to see some drowning pigs. That was like they're slowing down on the highway rubbernecking. Let's go see some drowning pigs. They don't see that. They see a suffering man no longer suffering. They see an outcast no longer being an outcast. They see a self-harmer healed. And that is what keeps their attention. And that is what they were afraid of. They didn't know how to put these two incidents together. Dressed in his right mind, sitting, quiet, peaceful. Those who had seen it told the rubbernecking gawkers what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and told about the pigs as well. By the way, here's the information you want. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. Such an interesting observation. Because it's easy to say, like, yeah, those pig farmers are mad. Jesus should probably turn their economy upside down. That's going to cause a scene. But I wonder if there's something else going on. Because they weren't afraid of that. They didn't comment on the pigs. They commented on the man being restored. And I wonder, sometimes when people get healed, sometimes the people that we've lost hope for start exercising some hope and some progress. Sometimes when people come back to community with a previous reputation, sometimes that can threaten. Sometimes that can threaten our culture and our social norms. And I wonder if the people had just a little bit of going on like, hey, we're used to things being the way they are. Back in the good old days, we just thought this guy was a lost cause. Back in the good old days, we did our thing and he did his thing, and we'd leave a little food out for him every once in a while, but we didn't really cross paths. And Jesus, that was working for us. But now this man presents as someone ready to enter back into community and make a contribution. And I wonder if that was a threat to their decent and well-ordered community. Just a thought. The scene starts wrapping up, verse 18. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed, well, let's substitute demonized, begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. Remember, in the book of Mark, we have this ongoing motif of Jesus' identity being a secret, being revealed slowly over time. Jesus telling some people, no, don't tell people that I did this. Telling some demons that would show up, don't go spreading my name. I'm not ready for that yet. There's just a small step forward here where Jesus says, go tell the people what God, he doesn't say me, but he says what God has done for you. Remember, occupied territory. The Decapolis was a Gentile region, pig farmers. These were outsiders. These were Gentiles. These were people that the Jewish contingent, the people at home would say, no, they don't understand God. They don't know Yahweh. They don't know our Old Testament stories. This was a testimony to the outsiders that God, Yahweh, the one and true God, sets people free. He's getting the Gentiles ready to receive the fullness of the gospel. Just the fact that this man was ready to go with Jesus, he was fully restored. Jesus sends him on a mission. We could almost consider him one of the first missionaries to the Gentiles. Thank you for listening to my testimony. He goes and tells his story. How would we sum up this story? I would put it like this. Jesus alone liberates us from powerful, oppressive forces, social forces that keep people on the outside, that keep people lonely, that keep people labeled. Social oppressive forces that cause people to be fearful of certain types of other people. Powerful, oppressive spiritual forces, the reality that there are dark, evil, malevolent spirits that want to mess with us. And Jesus, and in Jesus' name, is the only way that people can get free of that kind of affliction. And then the political oppressive forces. Even when territory is occupied, Jesus represents God's kingdom conquering all other kingdoms and empires. That's holistic restoration. Being personally free and the freedom to know that whatever, even if you're being beaten down by the hierarchies that just exist in the world, economic hierarchies or political hierarchies or whatever, you are actually free in Jesus. And there is hope that one day God's kingdom will fully conquer those forces. And we live into those realities now. Jesus restores us in whole. Let's close in prayer. Jesus, thank you for this story. Thank you for modeling how you see the humanity of a person suffering spiritually and socially. Thank you for modeling how even the most powerful physical forces, political forces, cannot touch the reality of the kingdom of God. So Jesus, help us to be fully aligned with you. Help us to be people that can tell our testimony. Help us to be people that are not afraid to step into darkness when people are experiencing darkness, to help set them free. Jesus, may we be a church where the captives are truly set free. In your name we pray. Amen.